fucking werewolf, you fucking cannibal cunt, get off of me. What are you doing?
Written, directed and starring Henry Owen Richardson. We are talking Prowling. Now Richardson has made a couple of other movies that sound kind of similar. I think it's called Lurking and Stalking. So he's clearly got a theme going here. But what is Prowling all about? Well, it's effectively a found footage werewolf movie. It is very, very low budget. What is the story? It focuses on two amateur filmmakers who are preparing to make their own indie movie, and they are kind of just doing some pre-work, looking at locations and things like this. So these two guys are effectively videoing their journey, and it takes place in 2001. And these two guys meet a third guy who has agreed to show them some great locations, and they trot off to the woods. Along the way they find an area in the woods which has got lots of missing posters from different people, and then there's a dark secret that is revealed that's probably fairly obvious if you look at the poster of this one. Anyway, what's it all about? What do we think about it? Now, as I said, this is a very, very low budget film, somewhat of an amateur production, but you could arguably say in some respects this comes across as somewhat of a realistic found footage movie. And why do I say that? It's actually because a lot of its faults actually make this footage in some regards seem more authentic. Now, what do I mean by that? So it's a double-edged sword, but for example, the audio is sometimes quite poor because they're only using the in-camera mic on the actual, the actual video camera itself. And as such, we don't really hear much of when people are standing a little bit further away. It also picks up a hell of a lot of ambient noise. Now, the upshot is that it makes this movie seem like this is genuine like footage in that respect, because there's no meddling and ADRs and things like that, or boom mics to capture more of a legible audio. The downside of course is it's not particularly legible sometimes, but it must be said there are some elements in that do feel like this was just people picking up a camera and filming things. I think the idea here of having our main two characters as indie filmmakers, and then this movie is an indie film itself, is kind of like a way where it kind of is a great method for hiding the fact that this is somewhat of an amateur production, because these two kind of young people are making this movie within this film, and some of the conversations that are had and the things that they would do are probably quite indicative of what they were doing for this actual film. So again, some of the actions here, they feel like, okay, let's go and do this location shooting. They're talking about various different kind of filming techniques and things like that. So again, there's that sort of element of, okay, that's somewhat sort of believable. And I will go as far as to say there are some scenes, not the whole movie, but there are some scenes where the relationships between our two friends seem somewhat kind of believable. This isn't one of these films where I find a lot with found footage films where it's just arguing on screen for like 40 straight minutes. Our two friends here, I mean, they have a couple of like heated discussions, but for the most part they're kind of on the same page because they are friends and they both are after the same thing. So again, some of the kind of the interactions between these characters seemed fairly sort of realistic to a certain degree. Not all of the acting, I would say, particularly when they kind of the tension ramps up. I think then it kind of goes into a little bit more, not so good. But yeah, for some of the kind of the dialogue, the general dialogue scenes, I think the idea here seems okay. So, you know, it has even though it is incredibly low budget, there's not a lot to this film overall. There are some elements here I feel, okay, it has somewhat of an air of realism to a certain degree, at least the sort of the setup elements to it. You can kind of buy into it to a certain degree. So the downside of, as I've said, some of the kind of the technical elements here, although they are realistic, they do work against the movie because you struggle to really hear some of the dialogue, and it's more the sort of just the chit chat sort of scenes before we get into any horror elements here, because people aren't raising their voices any time or just kind of talking amongst themselves. It's just general chit chat where you miss a lot of the film. Now, that being said as well, this movie is about 40 minutes of just general chit chat, and I have to say you could kind of more or less just skip large portions of this movie, and if you actually watched sequences that actually really amounted to any type of plot, the film would be about 10 minutes long of that. So there's a lot of scenes here that are just meandering around in the woods, sort of kind of talking with one another. So yeah, it just kind of seems a little bit sort of silly at times. Now the plot here is very scant. There is not a lot of real narrative in this movie, but even with the very little narrative that we have, I feel that there are still plot holes in it. They still have managed to make plot holes. Let me just put it like this. There must be a case of an individual or antagonist who must have some type of computer, printer and editing software in the middle of the woods in 2001. That's all I'm saying. So yeah, a few kind of plot holes here, and a few like visual things where it doesn't make sense. There's a lot of missing posters and none of them have phone numbers on it. Well, what's the point, you know? So a few kind of like elements here that I think were not as well thought. Use phone numbers that don't work if you don't want to put someone's real phone number on there. Filmmakers, that's all I'm saying. But for a lot of the runtime, this movie is kind of just dull chit chat that you can't really hear anyway. And I have to say that the idea being that these two guys meet a third guy who wants to show him this great location, and the location is the woods. It's like, surely you were able to do this yourself. It's just like some nondescript woods. Then when we're in the woods, you know, you can kind of hear a little bit of traffic here and there, and like you even see a couple of electronic lights, you know, that are in the background, so that you're thinking, well, we're not like deep in the woods like we're pretending to be here. Again, the kind of the being aware of your surroundings and stuff. Now, I've mentioned I thought the acting was believable in some parts, but when the actual horror elements are presented, I think you needed to have a little bit more panic in people's performances, because they seem not as panicked as one would be in this kind of situation. And I don't even know why they've agreed to just walk around in the woods in the dark, not knowing when they're going to begin with. Oh yes, well, we'll look at this location, which is just some woods, and we'll walk there until it gets dark and we end up getting lost in the woods. The werewolf stuff itself. Now, again, this is a very low budget movie, so the filmmakers here do wisely keep this just flashes and very, very brief glimpses. There's effectively a guy with a mask. I mean, it is what it is. It's a lower budget movie, but don't be expecting a lot of werewolf stuff on screen or big VFX moments. You'll see a couple of flashes with, you know, someone in a mask, basically. And the mask looks okay, but it's just, again, you're probably talking a few seconds of screen time of that, which is probably the smart move by the filmmakers, to be honest with you. But obviously, for someone who is watching this and wanting a more of a VFX creature feature style movie, then I think you may be able to be disappointed. So this is clearly a movie which is extraordinarily low budget, probably filmed by a group of friends for a couple of £100. This is a British film, and it looks like that at the end of the day. So I think, you know, this movie is a little unsatisfying because it's so light on anything of real substance. But who knows where these guys will go next. I mean, I think maybe they'll need to look at getting more people involved, I would suggest. So yeah, it's to be honest with you, it's a 3 out of 10. It's not a strong film. It's not the worst film I've seen this year, certainly. And I do think that it has some elements of where it seems authentic at times. But yeah, it's 3 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Please do leave me a comment and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.